It all started with a call I never should have answered. The kind of call that slithers in through the cracks of your otherwise ordinary day, the kind you feel in your bones before you even pick up. No caller ID. No voicemail. Just a string of random digits glowing on my phone screen like a warning I didn't know how to read. It was a lazy Thursday afternoon, the kind of day where time feels sticky like honey in the summer heat. I had just sunk into the couch with a warm mug of chamomile tea, the hum of the ceiling fan lulling me into a rare moment of peace. I almost let it ring out. But something held me back. Maybe it was curiosity. Maybe intuition. Or maybe it was the same impulse that makes people peek through half-open doors even when they know something's off on the other side. I swiped to answer. "Hello, is this Erica Montrose?" the voice asked, clipped and professional, like someone used to delivering bad news without flinching. I hesitated. Just for a second. My name sounded foreign coming from that mouth. "Yes, this is she. This is Tom Wilkins from Summit River Mortgage calling about your property loan. We're following up on your outstanding balance of $789,000 for the home purchased in Fulton County." My breath caught in my throat. The air in the room shifted, became thicker, heavier, like someone had just placed a boulder on my chest. I don't own a home," I said, each word dragging its feet through the tar of disbelief. There must be some mistake. But the man didn't miss a beat. He continued, calm and factual. "The loan was initiated in May 2021. You are listed as the primary borrower. All documents, including identification and signatures, match your file." My vision tunneled. I wasn't just hearing his words, I was drowning in them. I ended the call with trembling hands, heart pounding so loudly it seemed to echo through the room. May 2021. That was the exact month my cousin Leah packed up and moved out of state. I remembered it vividly, not because it was remarkable, but because of how hard she'd tried to make it sound like a triumphant new beginning. A fresh start, she'd called it. She'd stood in our driveway with her overstuffed U-Haul and half-hearted optimism, giving me a hug that didn't feel quite real. But her credit was shot. Everyone knew that. Leah couldn't keep a job longer than a few months. She had no savings, no steady income, no backup plan, just a trail of bounced checks and burned bridges. I remember Aunt Denise, my mother's sister, brushing away my concerns with that tired, tight-lipped smile she wore whenever trouble knocked. "We'll figure it out," she'd said. "Erica always comes through." At the time, I thought she meant emotionally. Financially, maybe. But not like this. Not this deep. A chill slid down my spine, crawling slow and deliberate. I shot up and went straight to the box beneath my bed, the one with my old financial records, things I hadn't looked at in years. Dust clung to the cardboard, undisturbed by time. I rifled through worn bank files, crumpled tax returns, faded pay stubs from jobs I'd long since left behind. And then I saw it. A letter. Summit River Mortgage. The envelope had my name on it, but I remembered dismissing it months ago, assuming it was another credit card offer or refinancing scam. I'd tossed it aside without opening it. I hadn't even thought twice. But now my hands were trembling as I tore it open. The contents blurred before my eyes, but one thing was clear: this wasn't just a clerical error. Someone had used my identity. And everything inside me screamed that this wasn't some stranger or random hacker. It was Leah. And if I was right, then she hadn't just stolen my name. She had stolen my life. Now it felt like a warning I never listened to. A small voice in the back of my mind, one that had whispered to me for years, was suddenly screaming. Every time I shrugged off something that didn't feel quite right, every time I told myself family wouldn't, they couldn't, that voice had been trying to get through. And now? Now the pieces were finally starting to fall into place, and they landed like broken glass. I sat on the floor, knees pulled tight to my chest, that letter still in my lap. My thoughts raced backward through time like a film reel rewinding in slow motion. Only a handful of people had access to my full personal information. My social security number, signature, even digital scans of my ID. I'd shared them over the years, always in the name of helping out. FAFSA applications, car insurance renewals, co-signing things to get someone into college, or even just covering a quick utility bill. But not strangers. Not outsiders. My family had everything they needed. I didn't want to believe it. God, I fought that thought like it was a sickness. Because if I let it in, if I even cracked the door to that idea, it would shatter everything I knew about the people who raised me, laughed with me, shared dinner tables and family barbecues. But betrayal doesn't always come in fire and fury. Sometimes it slips through the cracks, quiet and cold. This wasn't loud. It was slow. Silent. Surgical. And by the time I realized it was happening, the incision was already deep. That night, sleep was a stranger. I lay there on the couch, lights off, ceiling fans spinning overhead like a clock with no mercy, the shadows playing tricks on the walls. I kept replaying moments in my head, times when someone said, "Just sign here for me," or "Can I borrow your info for this form real quick?" Times when I thought I was helping. Times when they leaned on me because I was the responsible one. The trustworthy one. The dependable niece. The stable cousin. By sunrise, there was no more denial. No room for doubt. I wasn't going to ask if they did it. I was going to prove they had. Fueled by cold determination and too much black coffee, I began pulling boxes from closets, drawers from old file cabinets, even scanning emails from years ago. Anything that had my name, my data, any hint of a trail. Tax returns. Financial aid letters. Insurance policies. Co-signed medical forms from Aunt Denise's gallbladder surgery. All of it stacked neatly, all bearing one undeniable truth. I had handed them the weapon they used to stab me. Then came the credit report. I stared at the screen as it loaded, a mix of hope and dread coiling in my chest. When the results flashed across the page, everything inside me went still. There it was. The mortgage account in full detail. But not just that, no, it went deeper. A home utility bill in Georgia under my name. A closed credit card account with an overdue balance that tanked my score. 3 new accounts opened in the last 18 months. All in my name. None of them mine. I sat at the kitchen table printing them out page by page, my hands trembling. Each sheet of paper felt like a blade carving deeper into my trust. This wasn't just fraud. This was deliberate. And I couldn't fight this alone. I thought long and hard before deciding who to trust. But in the end, the answer was obvious: Jasmine. She was a coworker. Not flashy, not loud. Just kind. Steady. The kind of person who remembered your birthday without needing Facebook to remind her. When I told her everything, she didn't flinch. No pity, no disbelief. Just quiet, focused energy. She leaned in, eyes steady. "Call this guy Mr. Grady. He's a bulldog in a suit. He helped my cousin when her ex tried to steal her identity. If anyone can untangle this kind of mess, it's him." I didn't hesitate. The next day, I met Mr. Grady at a little cafe tucked away behind the public library. It was the kind of place where no one asked questions and the coffee was always lukewarm. He was already seated when I arrived. Late 60s, gray suit with worn elbows, thick-rimmed glasses perched low on his nose. He had the calm of a monk, like nothing in the world could surprise him. But there was something behind his eyes, an alertness. Like a predator that had simply learned how to wait. I handed him the folder, every document, every shred of evidence I had painstakingly gathered. He didn't speak. Not for 10 whole minutes. He flipped through the pages slowly, methodically, like a surgeon prepping for something delicate. I watched him in silence, my nerves rattling with every second that ticked by. And then, finally, he looked up. "Miss Montrose," he said, voice low but firm. "You're not just dealing with identity theft here. You're dealing with a conspiracy." Finally, he looked up, his eyes heavy with confirmation I didn't want but already feared. "This is identity theft. Fraud. Possibly even conspiracy if multiple people were involved." The words sat between us like a loaded gun. I nodded slowly, my voice a whisper. "I just want it gone. I don't want to send anyone to jail. His expression didn't change. You may not have to, but that's not up to you anymore. What is up to you is how clean your name stays. And for that, we need to make it official. Police report. Notify the lender. Dispute the loan. Lock your credit. And brace yourself, this could end whatever family ties you have left. That last sentence cracked something in me. It wasn't a threat. It was a reality I'd been avoiding. And it hit harder than I expected because despite the evidence, despite the cold clinical betrayal, I still held onto a shred of hope that maybe somehow this was all a mistake. But it wasn't. And now I had to choose between the people I loved and the person I had to protect, me. 4 days later, I filed the police report. I stood in the fluorescent-lit lobby of the station with my folder clutched to my chest like a life raft. The officer who took my statement, Detective Harrow, was kind, but his eyes were tired. He'd seen this before. Too many times. Family does what strangers wouldn't dare, he muttered, shaking his head as he typed. I didn't need him to explain. Meanwhile, Summit River received the notarized dispute packet. Mr. Grady made sure every I was dotted, every date documented, every accusation backed with timestamps and receipts. He sent it via certified mail, tracked every update. And then we waited. But I wasn't going to wait in silence. I needed to see them. Not through texts or phone calls. I needed to look into the eyes of the people who did this and pretend I didn't already know the answer. That Sunday, I went to Aunt Denise's house for dinner. Just like I had 100 Sundays before. The scent of baked pasta filled the air. The kitchen clattered with the usual sounds, pots boiling, laughter echoing, wine glasses clinking. Leah was there. Sitting like nothing had happened. Like she hadn't stolen 6 figures and a piece of my identity. My mother was there too. Cheerful. Chatty. Pouring lemonade like it was any other evening. Even Mason came. My brother. The one who never gets involved. The one who always shrugged and stayed neutral, but whose silence suddenly felt like complicity. I walked in with a smile. I hugged. I joked. I brought wine. I played it cool. Dinner smelled like garlic and deceit. I chewed each bite slowly, my stomach turning knots beneath the surface. I laughed when I was supposed to. I smiled when it was polite. But inside I was unraveling. And then came dessert, Leah's homemade peach cobbler slightly burned at the edges just like always. I set down my fork, licked the syrup from my thumb, and asked the question with the calm of a casual observer. So, does anyone know anything about a mortgage in Georgia with my name on it? It was like I'd shattered a mirror with a whisper. Silence. Leah dropped her spoon. The clink on the plate was louder than anything anyone said. Aunt Denise blinked too quickly, her lips parting slightly like she wanted to lie but hadn't figured out how. My mother froze mid-smile, the kind of stillness that says everything words refuse to say. Then Leah exhaled. Like a confession she'd been dying to let go. You weren't using your credit, she said softly, almost like I should be grateful. And I needed a way out. You always come through. The audacity in her tone chilled me. And then, as if that weren't enough, my mother chimed in. Quietly. Almost tenderly. It's not like you're paying it, Erica. It's just paperwork. Just paperwork. Just 600 pages of fraud. Just a mortgage with my name, my future, my credit. Just me. I looked at them all, my aunt's defensive silence, Leah's hollow justification, my mother's warped logic, Mason's lowered gaze, and it dawned on me. They didn't think they did anything wrong. They didn't ask. They didn't warn me. Because they never saw it as stealing. They saw it as borrowing from the family vault. And in their minds, I was the vault. I stood slowly, placed my napkin gently on the table like it was any other Sunday. My voice was steady. Calm. Detached. Thanks for the clarity. And I walked out. Not in rage. Not in tears. But with the kind of quiet resolve that only comes when you finally see the truth, and stop begging it to be something else. Days passed. Then a week. I kept checking my email like a ritual, every morning, every night, waiting for something, anything, to confirm I wasn't losing my mind. And finally it came. Summit River Mortgage, Fraud Review Update. The subject line alone made my hands tremble. I clicked it open with a slow breath, heart racing. Mortgage suspended. They had reviewed the documents. The signatures didn't match. The timestamps and IP addresses weren't from me. They were opening an investigation, questioning the notary, flagging the digital paperwork, and beginning the long, painful process of clearing my name. My credit was still bruised, my trust even more so. But the lie? The lie was unraveling. That evening, just as the sun dipped below the horizon and painted my living room in amber light, there was a loud, insistent knock at the door. It wasn't friendly. It was the kind of knock that demands, not asks. I looked through the peephole. Aunt Denise. She stood there with fire in her eyes and a storm in her chest. I opened the door halfway. Just enough to hear her rage. "How could you?" she snapped, pushing every word like a slap. "You went to the cops? That's family, Erica." I stood silently, letting her words hit and fall. They didn't land like they used to. She kept going, her voice rising with each sentence. Leah was desperate. She had nothing. We trusted you to help. "No," I said quietly but firmly. "You didn't trust me. You used me. Because you knew I wouldn't fight back." Her face twisted, part fury, part grief. "You've ruined everything," she said, her voice finally cracking. I looked at her, really looked. And I realized something important. She wasn't mad I'd reported them. She was mad I'd stopped playing my role. "No," I replied, my voice calm and final. "I just stopped pretending it wasn't already ruined." And with that, I shut the door in her face. Weeks passed. I poured all my energy into rebuilding not just my credit but myself. I started therapy. I took long, quiet walks in the park without needing to explain where I was going. I learned to sit in silence without guilt pressing against my chest. I even picked up pottery again, something I hadn't done since college. It grounded me, literally. I opened an online store and called it Reclaim Clay. Cheesy? Maybe. But it felt honest. I started reading again. Laughing again. Sleeping through the night. And then, one Saturday afternoon, as I stood by my window sipping tea, I saw them. Across the street. By the bus stop. Leah. Aunt Denise. My mother. They looked smaller somehow. Not physically, but in presence. Dimmer than I remembered. Like the weight of what they'd done had finally settled in. I walked downstairs. Not to argue. Not to scream. Just to face them. Leah's eyes were sunken, dark circles like bruises beneath them. My mother looked like she hadn't slept. And Aunt Denise, she couldn't even meet my gaze. "We made mistakes," my mother whispered, voice trembling. "I just need help," Leah said. Just for a little while. There was no entitlement in her tone anymore. Just exhaustion. I reached into my tote bag and pulled out a folder. Inside was the forged mortgage contract, void stamped across the front in bold red ink. Beneath it, I'd tucked something else. A birthday card they'd given me years ago. It said, "Erica, our steady one. Our emergency plan. You always come through." I handed it to my mother. And said only this. "I'm not your emergency plan anymore. I'm not angry. But I'm done." And then I walked away. I didn't turn back. They never came back. And I never needed them to. Because here's what no one tells you. When people use your silence as permission, sometimes the loudest thing you can do is leave without saying a word. So if you've ever been treated like the backup plan, like the fixer, the savior, the one who always cleans up the mess, let this be your sign. You're allowed to say no. You're allowed to walk away. And when you finally do, that's not betrayal. That's self-respect. Subscribe for more real and raw stories like this, only on Requital Stories, where we say the quiet parts out loud. Because silence protects the wrong people. And truth? Truth sets you free.